You just finished a week of Dart. Variables, functions, classes, maybe some async. It all ran in a terminal or a Dartpad window. Starting this week, that changes. You're not writing logic that runs and produces output anymore. You're writing code that is your user interface. The biggest thing I want you to all understand before you walk into class is that everything in Flutter is a widget. Not just the visible stuff, not just the buttons and the text fields. The padding around a button, well, that is a widget. The background color of your screen, that is also a widget. The thing that makes your content scrollable, you guessed it, that too is a widget. You build a Flutter app by nesting widgets inside other widgets. It's a tree, and that tree is your UI. If you're coming from a web development background, this definitely feels a little weird at first. In HTML, you have elements and CSS that describes how those elements look. They're separate concerns. In Flutter, the structure, the style, and the behavior all live together in the same widget tree. There's no style this element from outside. You describe what you want, and Flutter renders it. So that's the basic concept. Let's go ahead now and open up our editor, VS Code or Dartpad, and let's start building a few widgets. To kick off the rest of this demo, I'll start using dartpad.dev. We'll quickly transition into using VS Code. This is what's known as a code playground here. It allows us to get our hands dirty, play around with some Dart commands, but it's not going to be really a viable way to do our development going much past this week. But because you might be watching this video ahead of time and not have your full environment set up, this is a quick way to just start building a few widgets. So once again, if you're not here, go to dartpad.dev. And the big thing you're going to want to do is click under Create. You'll go to Flutter Snippet, all right? Now you can also create an account, so it saves your snippets, things like that. I'm not signed in at the moment. And you'll notice we have some Dart language over here. The big difference is this is now importing Flutter/material.dart. We still have this main method, and we have essentially our first widget here, which happens to be a stateless widget. And inside of here, we have our material app and scaffold, which I'll start to explain shortly. The big change here is that I'm now able to click Run. And when you click Run, if you give it a little bit of time, you'll see over here, this is now our app. This is different from before where we just saw the console output. This is actually what our Flutter app will look like when we build it in iOS, Android, native desktop, you name it. This is just a quick way to simulate how it will look before we get Visual Studio Code fully set up. Here's a nice visual representation of a Flutter app that shows the hierarchy and widgets nested in other widgets. You'll notice, for example, we have a material app widget, which inside of there is also a scaffold widget. If you jump back to the code here, you'll see here is the material app widget, and here is the scaffold widget. And you'll notice how widgets are made up of other widgets, and you'll start to get used to this. Now you'll quickly get used to using Visual Studio Code. There's a lot of shortcuts that make working with this easier. It's a little tricky using Dartpad, so I'll quickly stop using this. I just wanted to show this just in case you're having development environment issues. You can't get it set up, something like that. You're running late to the classroom and you just want to follow along. This will work in a bind, but long term, we really want to get Visual Studio Code working. Now, Material App, that is the outer wrapper. It gives you theming, navigation, all the material design infrastructure, which we'll talk about in the classroom. Scaffold is the screen itself. It handles things like the app bar, the little app that goes across many apps on your iPhone or Android. It also contains the body and a floating action button. Almost every screen you build this semester starts with a scaffold. We might do an experiment to see what happens if you build it without the scaffold, but for now, expect all your apps to have this material app widget and a scaffold widget. Now, in the case of Dartpad, when you want to make a change, let's say add a couple exclamation points here, you can click this hot reload button, and you'll see it has changed over here. This is going to be similar in Visual Studio Code as well. We don't need to rebuild our app or wait a long period of time when we're making minor changes to the app itself. For the next part of the video, I'm going to use Visual Studio Code. Now, if you haven't gotten your development environment working yet, now would be a good time to do so. You can still follow along, or you can use Dartpad, but I'm going to use this so I can start introducing some shortcuts. The first thing we're going to do to create our first Hello World app is we're going to do Control-Shift-P or Command-Shift-P on a Mac. And if you have Flutter installed, you can search for Flutter, and you'll see Flutter New Project. We're going to go ahead and click that. There's a couple different options we have here, and I'll go over these more in class. The empty application is, as it sounds, a very minimal application like what we just saw in Dartpad. Pretty much just says Hello World. An application, on the other hand, has a couple elements in it, and there is also a button that will track when you click to show you guys how to use state management and also some things about theming. For now, I'll go ahead and just do the empty application. Once you create an empty application, it will prompt you to store it somewhere. This will be similar if you're on a PC. The big thing you're going to want to remember here is you want to put your app in a directory without spaces in it. Okay, so please, I'll repeat that again. That's the biggest thing you'll want to remember throughout the course and throughout your Flutter journey. Put your app inside a directory without spaces in it. So I'll put this in here for now. I will hit select folder. We don't name it yet. We just say select a folder. This is the part where we name it. There's various requirements for a file name, which I will probably outline a bit more and talk about in class. The big thing is you can't start with a number. You can't start with a symbol. So I'll just call this Hello World. And you have to use underscores as opposed to spaces. We'll call this something like this for today. We're going to go ahead and click enter. This is actually a new feature that was not previously installed, and you may or may not get this. This is actually the first time I'm seeing this. You can actually select different platforms to target this for. I'll go ahead and just click OK. And this will go ahead and essentially set up the main part of my app. Over here, this is where all the files for our app reside. We'll spend a lot of time in class going through what each of these folders actually are a little bit more in depth. But for now, since this is just a quick study guide, the meat of where we're going to be working is in this main.dart file. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and click here. And you'll notice over here, this looks very similar to what we just saw in Dartpad. So this is kind of the equivalent app that we're building in Visual Studio Code. Now to go ahead and actually deploy this, what we're going to do is a couple ways to do this. The way I like to do it is click down here in the bottom right once your Flutter SDK is set up. Once again, if it's not set up, you'll want to watch another video on that or check out the other material. And we'll say, well, what device do you want to target? I have an iPad, I have an iPhone. At this point, I don't have my Android simulator set up at the moment. If you had it up and running, it might show up here. But if I click here, this will essentially start my medium phone. We'll cover this way more in class, but what I'd say is that long term, you definitely want to get the Android emulator working. This is because it works both on PC and Mac. That's where I'll be grading many of your projects in. But you can also use Chrome in kind of a bind. This is useful if you've gotten the Flutter SDK set up, but you haven't quite gotten Android working yet. That can sometimes be a bit of a hassle. And I have another video on getting Android actually working, getting the SDK installed on the lab machines. I'm not going to go into that today. So I'm going to go ahead and start my medium phone simulator. And while that starts up, I will pause the video and come back once that is running. I've moved the emulator over here. This is the Android emulator. Now the app is not actually running yet. To do that, once again, a few options, but the way I do it most of the time in class, we're going to go over here to the top right corner where you have the little play button. I typically want to do we want to do start debugging. This essentially opens it in a debug mode where we'll see all the errors, things like that. So go ahead, and once you make sure you have the correct device selected, we're going to go ahead and click start debugging. All right, this is the part that sometimes takes a little bit depending on how fast your machine is. If you ever see an error down here, that will tell you oftentimes what you need to type to fix it. right? Maybe you have an outdated version. Maybe something's wrong with the SDK. So I know that sounds cliche to read the debug logs, but it's interesting because oftentimes when a student has a problem, the answer will be written here. It's sometimes a little cryptic sounding, but when you dig through the actual message, you will oftentimes find out what the exact problem is, and it oftentimes presents you with a fix on how to resolve that, all right? If you can't resolve it, it's also a great method. You can kind of go here, you can copy any sort of error and paste that into Google, and that will oftentimes give you some good clues as well. Oftentimes, if you've had the problem, it's very likely somebody else has had the problem as well. Now, once again, here's our Hello World app. Notice how this looks just like Dartpad, same app here. And if I go ahead and, once again, what I did before, I added a couple exclamation points. I'm going to click Save. In this case, I'm going to do Command S or Control S on a PC, and you'll see my app is immediately uploaded over here. This is what's known as the hot reload. This is a great feature because we don't have to go through that long process of recompiling the app every time we make a little change. It's almost like web development. Like when we use the live server, we make a change, we quickly see it. Now, we'll get into this later in the class when we do more advanced stuff in our code and we add packages. The hot reload won't always do everything we need it to. Sometimes we will have to go up here and maybe hit stop and start. This would actually trigger a reset of the app as well. But for now, because it's just an intro video, we're just going to stick with the hot reload for this simple introduction. The first thing we're going to add to our app is actually an app bar. That's that little bar that goes across the top of your app. Now, most apps tend to have some iteration of this, and you'll quickly see when you're using Flutter and making your apps, there's a lot of things already built into Flutter, and there's also a lot of packages you can use, so you don't need to reinvent the wheel. Now, we could, in theory, build and design our own little rectangle and add text to it, but this is already built, and it's already built with tons of features. So I pulled up the actual documentation on AppBar on the Flutter docs, and you can browse this on your own, and you can see this is what the code looks like to create an app bar. I can click Run, and it gives you a quick demonstration of what it will look like here. This one, has a little button with the snack bar. And you can see as you scroll down, they get a little more complicated, doing all sorts of stuff. We're going to start much simpler than that with our app bar right here. Back at our code, let's go ahead and now insert that app bar widget. Now, app bar is a property of Scaffold. Real quick, if I go out here and I try to start typing app bar, you see it's complaining because app bar is a part of the Scaffold widget. So it's not going to work wherever we want to put it. We have to actually put it inside of the scaffold. And you can see as I start to type, Visual Studio Code is pretty good at suggesting things that I want to put in here. Now, one annoying catch here, I'll explain this when we get to more advanced topics in Study Guide 3. We're just going to get rid of this const for now. So go ahead and if you're following along, get rid of that const in the Hello World app. I know it seems a little weird because I hate doing that without fully explaining it, but I'll try to get to it quickly. We're going to get rid of that const up there, and we're going to say app bar : and you'll see it's quickly now giving me a list of various things I can assign to that app bar, such as widgets, properties, things like that. You can see it's a very long list here, right? So Flutters and the SDK are good at giving you tips, but it can be overwhelming. That's why we want you to have a basic understanding of building this stuff. Otherwise, this list will just be way too overwhelming. You can see, okay, I can go ahead and insert that app bar, and I can give it an app bar widget, all right? Now, let me just go back and do this. Let's say we forgot to remove that const, all right? Hypothetically, we forgot to remove that const. And you can see now when I hover over here, it's complaining, essentially saying that the constructor being called isn't a const constructor, all right? So what is const? Const is a promise that nothing in here changes, that nothing inside this material app changes, which it really can't guarantee because we might have stuff changing dynamically. We'll get more into this stateless versus stateful discussion later, but for now, the easiest way to deal with it and to at least build our Hello World app is just to get rid of it. So a couple options we have, like I said, just delete it like that, or when you hover over it here, you can scroll down and you can do a quick fix. All right, let's see if I can get the quick fix to come this time. We're going to hover over app bar, scroll down here. We're going to do quick fix, and it says, okay, remove the const. And once again, that resolves our error. I went ahead and zoomed out a little bit and zoomed in here so we can fit everything in the screen and restarted the app. Now that we finally got that worked out, we can go ahead and start inserting some stuff in our app bar. Now, if I hover over here with the mouse, you'll see it gives a list of various properties you can assign inside the app bar. Another thing you can do is do a control space, which will normally launch a little pop-up listing the different properties it can give you. My VS Code is having some issues right now, so it's not working. So I'm just going to skip that. We'll show that in a later study guide. But I'm going to go ahead and start typing title. This is a property you'll probably want to give your app bar. And this, once again, can take various different things, big list of things. So getting a little practice helps you know, well, what do I probably want to give it? In this case, we're going to give it a text widget, which looks very similar to our text widget down here. And we'll just give this a name. We'll say Study Guide 1 App. We'll do our Control S or Command S, and the hot reload will then show our app bar up here. Great. Generally, you'll want to put a comma after your widget, especially because you might want to put another property here as well. Let's try giving it a background color. I'm going to do background color colon. All right. Now, we can spend a lot of time going over themes, things like that. For now, we're going to say colors.color, and we will do colors dot, how about amber? We'll try that. All right, we'll hit save. And now you can see our app bar has a nice amber background color as well. I went ahead and did a quick reset for the next part of the video so I can show you the control space trick. That's going to come in a lot of handy. Let's suppose we want to put hello world maybe in a blue background. We want to change things around. We're limited in what we can do here because the center widget only has one single child, which means we can only put one widget in here at the moment. So for now, we're going to do this manually. We're just going to go ahead and delete this. And we're going to go ahead and type container. Container is probably one of the widgets we'll use a lot of the time. We'll use columns, containers. Those are probably the ones I use the most, I would say. Now when I go in here and I click my control space, you'll see, this is what I was trying to show you guys, a little drop down with all these common properties that you can assign the widget, so you don't have to memorize them all. Once again, it's overwhelming, but the one we're going to say is, well, let's give this a child. And the child can be, once again, any other type of widget. We're going to go ahead and do text. And we'll say about welcome to our app. All right, and we will click save. And you'll see now that this is actually moved up here to the top left. A couple of reasons why. Well, first off, we removed our center. So now it's just positioning itself right below the app bar. We'll probably go ahead and add that back in later on, but for now this is okay. Because this isn't a container now, though, we can apply other properties here. I'm going to do our control space once again. Let's say we want to give it a background color. In this case, because it's a container, we don't choose background color, we choose color. So unlike the app bar up here where I did background color, here we're going to do color. And I'm going to say, how about colors dot green? Let's try green. Save this. And now you'll see our welcome to our app has a green background. All right. That was an all right way of doing it. There was nothing wrong with that way of doing it, but I want to show you guys some quick shortcuts that might help you out as well. So let's click undo a little bit and let's revert back to what we had before. All right, here is what we had before. Now, a couple options we could do here. And I'm not saying I'm picking the right one, I'm just picking A1. Let's say I want to wrap this in a container, or I want to wrap the center in a container. What I can do instead is I can left click on the text widget and I can do either command space if you're on a Mac or control space on a PC. And that will bring up this little menu here. Okay, there's tons of awesome shortcuts in here that you'll use all the time. All right, I could wrap it with a center. I could wrap it with padding. Okay, I could wrap it with a column. In this case, let's go ahead and wrap with a container. All right, you'll see that this has now put this in a container with a child, which means I can then go ahead, I can put my comma in here, and I can give that a color, and I can once again do colors dot green. Okay, so that was perhaps a slightly quicker way of doing it. The difference being is it's still wrapped in a center widget here. One thing you'll notice is that it is all in one line here. Now, you can do an Option Shift F to reformat your document, which I'll try here, but that still kept it to be one long line. And this is something that's changed throughout the versions of Flutter. In old versions, I could add a comma here, and simply doing that would cause it to wrap after I did something like that. Unfortunately, that doesn't still work. I'll show you guys a fix for that later on. But for now, we're just going to kind of manually fix the formatting here. I prefer to see it like this, where it's not quite as cluttered in one line. All right. I want to wrap the video up because it's getting to be nearly 20 minutes. We'll quickly just try a few other properties. And like I said in class, we'll spend more time going into these. You'll get practice with these. Let me just undo this really quick to show you when I add maybe another property here. We'll go ahead and we'll add a width. We'll set the width to be 200. We'll set the height to be 200. I will save it. And now you can see this has expanded to that size. Let's try doing that Option Shift F one more time here. And you'll see when I did it this time, it has now automatically formatted it all nicely on multiple lines, right? So the threshold to where it will wrap it to multiple lines has changed over the years. I'll give you guys a trick later on to make it always do that. But for now, just keep that in mind. If you do the auto format, it will make it go to multiple lines, but you need to have kind of enough stuff before it will warrant that worthwhile to do, all right? Let's add a couple more properties. Another common thing we might want to do is change the look and feel of this text. We'll do a method that's almost like inline CSS for now. We'll learn more advanced ways of doing it later, but we want to target this text. So with the text, I can actually break this out into multiple lines as well. And I can add now a style property here. All right. We do need to also add a comma here. All right. And well, style, well, what does that take? It can take a bunch of things, but we're going to give it a text style widget. All right. And once again, this is where all these shortcuts are going to help you out here. Let's do our control space, and you'll see, well, these are common styles we can give it. Maybe I want to give it a color or a font family. For now, we'll do font size. And in this case, font size can just take an int. So we'll say 24, save that. And you see that's quickly expanded. Let's also adjust the font weight. So I will also give it a font weight. All right. Now, in this case, it doesn't take a number. Sometimes you can hover over it to preview what it needs to get. But we want to actually give this a font weight. And we'll do font weight dot bold and save that. And there you go. We've now bolded our green box. So I know this was just a quick overview into Flutter, making that transition from Dart. We have a lot more exploring to do, but I hope this helped get your hands dirty and show you guys some of the shortcuts you'll be using.